Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to Wix Wiz. You might be familiar with Wix payments from things like your Wix store or Wix bookings, but you may or may not know that there's also the option to use the Wix-Pay API completely independent from these applications and pretty much design payments for almost anything. For example, if you check out this Tip the Wiz calculator that I developed here, I can create a custom widget like this where a person selects a tip amount and can click tip now in order to leave a payment. And all this is done using the Wix Pay API. In this first tutorial, I'm going to be touching on the very basics of how to integrate with this with your website. And in later tutorials, I will be talking about how to create this widget in its entirety and even about how to use different currencies for payment. So let's get started. So before we actually get started with any of the coding, I want to first give you kind of a bird's eye view of the API and how it works, and then talk about some of the prerequisites for accepting payments on Wix, which will be necessary to actually make your code work. So first of all, this is the API documentation, the Velo reference. I will be linking to this below in the description. And you can see here that the Wix-Pay is actually made up of two parts. So we have the Wix-Pay API and we have the Wix-Pay backend. And we're going to need both of these parts in order to implement payments on our website using the API. And in general, the difference is that Wix-Pay handles all of the front end, the user-facing things, and we're going to use that code on the page itself in the Velo coding area on the bottom. And the Wix-Pay backend, as you can hear from the name, is code that runs in the backend. And the reason that we have these two parts is really because the user initiates payment on the front end, but there is also a lot of sensitive calculations and information that we don't want to expose the front end user to, and that's why that stuff happens on the back end. You'll see here that inside the documentation, we have a few subsections. These subsections are currencies and start payment, and also here in the back end, we have things related to currencies, and we have this create payment method. I'm not going to be talking about the currencies in this tutorial. So if that's what you're interested in, you might want to hop a few videos forward, and I'll be talking about that more in depth. Just in a note, what it does is calculates the different rates for different currencies so that you can accept payments or at least present the amount that a payment would be worth in another currency. But for now, we're just going to be really dealing with the very basics of the API, which are these two functions, the create payment in the back end and the start payment in the front end. Another thing that you should note before getting started is that you will need to have a premium plan on your website that accepts online payments. So not just any premium plan, but if I'm not mistaken, you need to have at least this business basic plan for your website. This is the pricing here for a regular Wix site. Editor X might be slightly different. And this is what you're going to need, even if you're using Wix payments along with Stripe or something like that, you're still going to need this business basic plan at least in order to get started with this. In order to set up payments on your site, once you have a premium plan, you can just go in your dashboard to settings. And then from settings, you're going to want to go over here to accept payments. And then we'll get to that page that I was on before, where we actually connect different payment methods. So here you can see that we have credit cards, debit cards with Wix. So this is Wix payments. This is something that Wix handles the payments completely. We also have PayPal, manual payments, which we're not really talking about today. And you'll see here on the bottom, you can also connect other payment options, which is a long list of different providers that you can manage the Wix payments with. And this is really has to do with just how the payments are being processed in terms of how the code is going to work on the front end and what we're doing today, that would be the same no matter which one of these you select. In order to connect to Wix Payments, you're going to go over here and click to connect. And you can see here that I've connected Wix Payments, but for this specific site that I'm demonstrating this on is not a premium plan. And so I'm being prompted to upgrade. You can upgrade just to try it out, and you'll have a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if you're just experimenting with the code and you want to try things out, then you can do that. Or you might already have a plan that you're paying for, and then you can just go ahead and implement the code that we're going to write directly into your existing site. So now that we've kind of gone over those prerequisites and an bird's eye view of what we're doing, let's actually head over to our site and start writing some code. So here I have the page where we are going to implement the Wix-Pay API. And what I have built out here already is this little text box which says hugs $5. And this is just here to represent any kind of information about the thing that the person is going to be paying for. This isn't necessary in order to implement the payments, but it's just trying to simulate the skeleton of a situation where somebody is going to be making a payment. And this, which is critical for actually initiating the payment, it's a buy now button. This is the front end, and what we're actually going to start with is the back end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the public and back end files, and I'm going to create a new web module, and I'm just going to call this Wix-Pay backend, let's call it. And here I'm going to erase everything that we have, and I'm going to be pasting some of the boilerplate code from the Wix API right over here. And if we go to our API documentation, I'm just going to go right over here to Wix-Pay backend and to this create payment method. And I'm just going to copy the code that we have over here, which is the backend code, so what you see over here, and copy all of that into the backend code of my website. Put that right over there. Let me zoom in a little bit and let's explain what we have here and how we're going to be using this. So we have a function called Wix-Pay backend that we've imported from the Wix-Pay backend module, and this is different than the one I created here. This is just a backend file in the website. And basically what it does is it creates a payment object using some basic information about the items which we are going to be purchasing. And you can see here that it's an array, and we have the name of the product or service or whatever the payment is going to be for. We have the price, and if you don't indicate otherwise, this price will be the default currency of your website. And amount is the total of all the items. So you can see here that we have an object within an array. Let me see if I can zoom in one more. We have here an object within an array, and we could easily add another item in here. So I can just add a comma and copy over this entire object. And let's say we're going to have two products here. So I'll have one product, product name 1 and product name 2. And this one would be $5, and this one would be $6, and the total would be $11. Okay, just to indicate how we would use multiple products, and I'll demonstrate that more once we get this up and running basically. So this is the back end basically of what we need for implementing Wix payments. And now we can head over to the front end, which is the code over here. And I'm going to put this client-side code or front-end code right over there. So I'm going to copy this over and paste it right over here inside of our Velo code. And you can see here that we're importing create my payment from backend/pay. So I just need to change, first I'm going to move these imports up here to the top level. format that. And here we have create my payment. So that's the name of this function right over here from the backend. But we named our backend file Wix-Pay backend. So I'm going to name that here as well. So it's backend slash Wix-Pay backend. And again, you can name your files whatever you want. I just felt that was the simplest for now. And this Wix-Pay is the front end Wix-Pay module. Now what we have here is a function which is basically the callback function that executes for the click event of the button. I'm going to be writing this out myself. So I'm going to click double enter here and select our buy now button. Or was it pay now? Pay now, what did I call the button? Let's see what I named the button. Buy now. It was buy now. Okay, I'm not going crazy. So buy now button and on click. And here we are going to have a callback function. And basically what we need to put inside of this callback function is this create my payment. So I'm going to go over here and copy paste that and get rid of all this. So this should work. I'm going to format this and publish the website. And basically what we're doing here is we're saying, calling a method that we imported here, which is create my payment. And then within the promise, we are saying to start the payment, and with the payment ID that got returned to us from our backend function. So basically, here we are returning this method from the backend. And what this returns is that payment object, which is right over here. So this dot then is actually just executing the promise from right over here, because we're returning this entire Wix-Pay backend. I know this might be a little complicated to wrap your head around, but let's first just see it in action, and then we can also break it down a little further and do a few experiments and elaborate a little more on what's possible here. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that, and I'm going to publish the website, which I think I did already. And let's head over to this tab right over here, where you can see the live site. And if I click this buy now button, then with the Wix-Pay module will open up. And you can see here that the pricing is $9. And here we have product name, quantity 1. And here we'd fill out our personal information and then continue to execute the payment. Everything that's from this step and on cannot be changed. There are some pieces of information that we can pass in here. For example, the email, the first name and last name. I'm not going to be demonstrating that in this tutorial, but in the next step of the tutorial where we actually build a fully functioning tipping or donation system, I'm going to elaborate a little more on that. So now we're back on the front end, and what I want to do is I want to break up this Wix start payment function a little more, because this in itself is actually a promise. And if we take a look at the documentation, you can see that it returns a result. And this has a lot of information about the payment itself and the status of the payment, which would be very important to know in any kind of transaction. Because if the transaction was unsuccessful, then we might want to do one thing. And if it was successful, we might want to do something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transform this into async await, which is the way of handling promises that I prefer and that I use when I'm doing coding on my own projects. So in order to do that, I'm going to say const payment is equal to await create payment. And we can get rid of this then. And here we're just going to need another constant, another variable, sorry. And this is going to be called result. And this will be await Wix-Pay.startPayment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two consoles over here. Payment and a console for result. I really want to see what that object looks like. And I'm going to publish the site. As you can notice, I'm doing all of the testing on the live site, and that's because Wix Payments doesn't really work in preview mode, at least not very well and not in all situations. So whenever I'm dealing with payments, I like to test that on the live site. And another thing to notice is that, let me get rid of this because we're not using it. Another thing to notice is that in order to actually test these things out, you're going to have to make a payment. So I'm not going through with the whole payment on my site at the moment, but when you want to finalize this and really check that everything's going through, you're going to want to make a small payment, and you can just change the prices to something, I don't know, like $1, and then make a payment with your own credit card to make sure that everything is working as expected. So let's open up the console over here. And first I'm going to click the Buy Now, which will initiate our payment. And you can see here that we have the payment object returned. And basically what this has is the amount, the currency, which as I said is the default currency of your website unless specified otherwise. And we have an ID here for the payment. And this is basically what we passed into the start payment function. Remember, we did payment.id, and here we have items. So this came from our backend, the product name, price, and quantity, which defaults to 1 because we didn't specify anything else. And then we have the user info, which hasn't been supplied yet. And if I go ahead and I close this module without continuing the payment, then we have here our result. And you can see here that we have the information about the payment, and importantly, we have the status, which is canceled. Okay, I, the user, decided to cancel this payment by closing that pop-up. Okay, so this is how we can get the information about the payment and the result of the payment and do stuff with that on our website. The next thing I want to take a look at is the back end. So let's hop over to the backend, and let's take another deeper look into the documentation of the Wix-Pay backend. So let's take a look here at the create payment method. And we can see here the different stuff that we are supposed to pass into the create payment function. So we have the amount, which as I said is the total sum of the price, and we have the currency. Okay, so currency is something that we didn't pass into our function, so it defaulted to the default of the website. But you could pass in a currency if you want to pay in a different currency, and everything is pretty much what I said. Just like here, we have the list of items, which is name, price, and quantity. And I'll show you a demonstration now with how we can change the quantity and the user info. So this is what I was mentioning about passing the user info, which is going to be part of the next tutorial. So let's head back into our backend. And I want to demonstrate now how it would look if we had several items here inside of our payment. So I'm going to say that the first item should be a hug. And this will be $5 because that's what we're selling on the website. And the quantity will be 2. And here we also need a comma. And this is something that we could pass from the front end. So for example, I could add a drop down or an input here and use that to pass the information to the backend. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next part of this tutorial as well. But for now, I just want to show you how you can do this all manually. And let's add in another item. And the item that I'm going to add in here is going to be travel expenses, because I don't know where you are. And if I have to travel all the way to you to give you the hug, then you're going to have to pay for that. and the price can be, let's say, $500, and 2 because I need to go back and forth. So for $505, you can get, oh, so this should actually be $10 because it's 2 hugs. So you can get 2 hugs for the price of $510, and the total will be 510. And I just want to stress here that the importance of passing this information from the back end. So basically, the person who's initiating the payment on the front end can decide if they want to pay or not, but once they are paying, they can't change any of the information regarding the items. So the prices are set, the quantities are set, and this can prevent tampering because otherwise you can have somebody who initiates a payment and they can change information on the front end if they're a developer and they know how to hack into your website on the front end, because front end code could be changed by anyone. And they can change, let's say, the travel expenses to be $5 and pay. And then your website will think that they have paid for travel expenses because it shows that a payment has been successful. But in reality, they had tampered with the price and only paid $5. So this is why, unless you want to give the user complete freedom over the amount that they're paying, for example, in the donation app that we'll be creating in the next tutorial, in some situations, I'm going to give users the ability to decide how much they want to pay. And then that is not so sensitive because that is their decision to begin with. But in any other situation where you have a fixed price for whatever you're selling, then you're going to want to handle that all from the back end. And obviously, in most situations, you won't be coding this out by hand like I am now, but you will add, for example, here, a query. So we can say, for example, const items will be equal to await Wix data dot query. Okay, and we'll be querying a data set and getting the items with all this information. So I'm just demonstrating what a realistic situation will be like, and we will be showing this in the next tutorial, which will be a little more elaborate. So let's just test out this example where we have 2 items and each one has a quantity of 2. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this and head back to the live site. Refresh just to make sure that we're dealing with the newest version of the site. And I'm going to hit buy now. Okay, so the payment module did not come up. So let's head into here and inspect. And I have a feeling that I know why. So we were unable to handle the request on the back end. So what we could actually do, and this is important to show a little debugging, I always like to do this even though it's not planned. Let's head over here, and because this is an export function, I can actually run this from the back end and see what kind of error we're getting. So let me click play here and then run. And can't create, total amount should be the sum of item amounts. Okay, so what I think the issue is here, if we head to the back end, so I had said that the price of a hug is 10 and quantity is 2. So actually the total amount should be 1,020. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this back to 5. And this is going to be 1,010. I hope you understand the mistake that I made. So when we create this in our next tutorial, we're actually going to do all these calculations using a function. I'm not going to be creating it, calculating it like this just by hand. It's also a conceptual thing that this price, you have to understand that within the items, the price is the price of an individual item. It's not the price of the entire quantity of items. So this is not the price of 2 items here. This is the price of 1 item, and we have 2 of those. So when we're totaling it out, we have to multiply this by 2 and this by 2 as well. Okay, so let's just double check and make sure that that's working. So I'm going to go back here to the backend function, get rid of our previous run, and run it again. And see, now it was returned with the payment info. So let's go ahead and hit publish and go back to the live site. Hit buy now. And our payment module came up. And here you can see the total has changed to the new total that I passed in. And we have hug, quantity 2, travel expenses, quantity 2. Okay, so that is how to set up a very, very basic Wix-Pay scenario. And you don't have to be in your store, you don't have to be in bookings. You can create this completely by yourself for any kind of thing you want to sell on your website. I hope you found this tutorial informative. If you did, I do recommend you check out the next one. And if it's not out yet, then you should probably hit that subscribe button so that you get a notification when that does. I create new videos weekly, so if you like this, please come again.